Welcome to the Email Insider Summit. As Ken said, we've been doing this for 14 years. I'm Steve Smith, I'm the Editorial Director of Events here at MediaPost. Welcome. I know many of you. By the way, I know we saw the show of hands of who has been here before. How many of you are new to the summit? You're in for a treat. I'll tell you some of the basics in a second. But first things first, for those of you who are sitting in chairs in back, there are seats up here. If you want to make your way to the front, there are some seats at tables if you want to grab them. I'm losing my light keeps going off on me. I can't see my notes. So well, we're not going to do it now. So I've been covering the digital transformation since 1993. I started doing this writing for a magazine called Cyber Surfer back in the early 90s. One thing has been true throughout these oh so many years I've been doing this, and that's that the technology has always been ahead of execution. We have always aspired to use the technology and for the technology to work in ways that in many ways organizations are not ready for. What the tech can do and what is actually practical within organizations to execute are two vastly different things. And one of the things, honestly, I've always really liked about the Email Insider Summit especially, is that, and it's very refreshing about this summit, is that we've tended to focus more on the state of execution as opposed to rather than the state of the art. And it's one of the things that I think we'll be seeing over the next few days, is to be sure, we've had wonderful speakers here over the years who are at the bleeding edge of leveraging technology, Chick-fil-A, Electronic Arts, Best Buy, the Farmer's Dog, one of the new D2Cs in the market. But also, one of the things that really goes on here over the next few days is people sharing the ways they're actually executing in-house within and solving for a set of limitations that everyone has, solving for limited resources, solving for concrete silos, and not being able to leverage data across those silos effectively, and organizations that are not up to speed and do not know how to get past batch and blast emails. Those are the kinds of things that we see talked about at the Email Insider Summit through a lot of case studies and a lot of panel discussions, and especially in the roundtables. And I think it's of special value, and one of the things that we're proudest of here. Our theme this time is, of course, personalization, but also personalization as a strategy. It's one of the things that we've been seeing evolving over the last few years, especially as the direct-to-consumer brands have been coming on. And it's the idea that personalization is more than just a tagged subject line or an abandoned cart that follows you around in your inbox. But it really is personalization is now becoming fundamental to a brand identity and a brand strategy at various touch points along the way. So one of the things that I've been doing in putting together this program is asking people to talk and to think in those terms and talk about the ways email is part of a larger personalization strategy, the ways in which a brand is being experienced by that consumer in a lot of different ways. Email is still core to that idea of personalization. This is a survey from Drift, taken of 1,000 consumers over the last couple of years. It's still email remains not only the preferred channel, but the one that is growing most, that is still being used. A third of respondents said they're actually using email more this year than they did last year. And it also remains the most prevalent and the most often and the most preferred route for communicating with organizations. These are just three quick shots to see the ways in which email is being preferred by consumers as the main personalization point between them and a brand, and it's also growing rather than contracting. Despite all of these other channels, email remains at the center of this. And that's what we're doing here, is talking about the ways in which email really remains the linchpin of a broader personalization strategy. It still remains the universal cross-channel identifier for users. It's also the route that people are most comfortable with. So we'll be talking about this over the next few days. But we start always with these summits with you, because that's what the summit is about, is you sharing your ideas. And as many of you know who responded to our survey, we start these summits of late by taking the temperature of what you guys are thinking, the sets of attitudes and sentiments points that you're bringing to the summit, often as they relate to a lot of the topics that we'll be talking about. So I'm going to quickly move through a few of these topics, this is a huge deck of responses from you. I'm not going to try to go through it and bore you with it now. We will put it online so you can go back and reference it, but there are certain things that popped in some of the responses that I wanted to highlight, and to foreshadow some of the things that we'll be talking about over the next few days. So we started by asking, what's been the biggest challenge in bringing your email program to the next level of personalization? Data, data, data was the answer that came from a great many of you. Integrating data across, especially across silos, and the ways in which you can maintain and assure data quality, but also integrate it with the rest of the organization. We'll be talking a lot about this tomorrow. We're going to be talking about maintaining the quality of data and how you can apply it across the organization. But then also the technology itself, the data architecture, having the real tools at hand and the integration with your ESP to be able to execute on the personalization. Getting the business internally, getting the internal politics, and getting internally the ability and the permission and the resources to make content that actually makes that personalization work is one of the key things that people mention. Building customer profiles. Sorry, some of these are, this was actually done on the fly. A lot of stuff came in last night. I was actually assembling this deck overnight to get everybody's ideas in. But again, we'll be posting this online so you can catch up online and see all of the responses. I asked, in the last year, what change in your email program has had the greatest impact on performance? And we got everything, especially discussions of personalizing off of specific behaviors, automation, but also moving product recommendations into the inbox. Segmentation, segmentation, segmentation is probably the most often mentioned aspect that people are doing is they're increasing their levels of segmentation. Also, I was especially struck by the final comment, which comes to us from the health industry, which is the importance of segmentation and doing personalization right. At some point, as we get one-to-one marketing really right, and we're really starting to use the inbox to talk one-to-one to customers, it's not only, we not only have to be careful about the ways in which we're targeting them, but also the ways in which they're responding to emails. I thought this is a really important piece. In my industry, it's so crucial to segment communications so you're being sensitive to a person's health and wellness journey and not sending them communications that may trigger negative thoughts. It seems to me that actually has implications for a lot of other industries as we start moving the inbox and communications to a more intimate level with consumers. Personalized offer and delivery, email. I was especially struck by this one, an email that's followed by direct mail and social, that sort of surround sound approach. Also, location popped up a number of times. Using in the inbox, making reference to someone's nearby resources, or even using local weather to register and acknowledge that you know where that person lives. Again, these are simply things that people have said that mention us that are triggering better performance that they've seen over the last year. Frequency personalization, I think that's another interesting thing, allowing people to manage the relationship and manage the messaging. And again, one of the interesting things, and again indicating the various levels of sophistication that we have at this summit, is that for some of you, simply personalizing that subject line is having one of the biggest impacts. Next, this was a really interesting question, a really interesting response. I asked about privacy readiness, and especially the looming regulations from the CCPA and assorted state regulations. And one of the things that really struck me is how many of you who responded felt that you were you really were fairly ready for these changes. I asked everybody to rate from 1 to from we are screwed to 5, bring it on, and most of you answered 4 or 5. Felt that there's actually a considerable amount of readiness throughout the organization. This is a little sobering. We have a team of lawyers guiding the process and ensuring we have a standard operating procedure in place to be compliant. But also, one of the things that a lot of people mentioned is that GDPR helped get them ready for this, that a lot of the regimens and the protocols that they put in place to get ready for overseas policies and regulations helped them get ready for CCPA. And then finally, at least one person in your group felt we are screwed, that they really are not quite ready for this, that when these regulations come in place, they're not entirely sure what will happen. But another respondent who also said one of the problems is getting their own executives to take this seriously enough. I also asked, what has been the chief challenge in extending messaging into other one-to-one channels like SMS, alerts, social messaging, bots? We're going to have a couple of presentations over the next couple of days, one tomorrow on bots, one on Wednesday, talking about various messaging, mobile alerts and SMS channels. I'm always curious about how email is integrating with these. And I got sort of, I was a little surprised how many of you remain fairly reticent about these channels, either because they're difficult to implement or you're not entirely sure that your user base is there yet. So we got a lot of responses like this, that there are system limitations, there are things like legal compliance, once you start moving into mobile especially, that people are experiencing, not having the talent on hand to really execute omni-channel efforts. The ability to integrate data across these various channels still isn't there yet. A lot of the technology providers really aren't talking to one another well enough so that especially mobile and email can be well integrated. Resources and staffing. The other part to this is a lot of people said they'd like to do it, but how do they prioritize? How do they know yet whether their users really are there and ready to accept these new channels, and whether it's really worth funneling resources there? And again, things like compliance, orchestration across channels. And finally, I asked, what is the industry's trend or tactic that's the most overhyped? AI, which usually pops up as a good idea, and it's unclear how people are really understanding it or implementing it, or the fact that AI is simply being tagged onto just about anything that anybody does that's automated, or is using any rules-based approach to anything, is sort of diluting the enthusiasm around it. But also, one of the things that popped among several of you was influencer marketing, that we're definitely going through a period where we're starting to see a kind of peak in influencer marketing, and some reticence and some doubt about whether influencer marketing really is going to scale. Chatbots, we'll be hearing tomorrow about a good example of a chatbot being implemented and also being integrated with other messaging programs, and we'll see how that fares. Time zone send personalization. This is a really interesting point, that in using time zone personalization, they found that the West Coast actually was already used to using East Coast time anyway, and it didn't have any real impact on what they were doing. And again, thank you all for these responses. We're going to post them online where we'll be reporting and blogging on them. I would urge you, those of you who had interesting ideas around to share, bring them into the roundtables, because that's really the heart of our summit. And let me just give you a couple of quick notes about the summit and how it works for those